Hey, I'm Spencer from Tape 9, and this is the Novation Circuit, a 2015 groove box that a lot of people love. But is it worth buying in 2020? Let's check it out. The circuit comes in a box that looks like this. It's pretty nice, and it comes with a wall adapter, so you can plug it in when it's not on battery power, as well as a USB-B cable to plug into your computer so you can swap around sounds. And as well as that, you've got two breakout cables going 3.5mm to 5-pin DIN MIDI, so you can sync it with your other gear. So before we even turn this on and see what it's like, let's take a look at the front. So right here, you've got a headphones port, just 3.5mm jack. You've got your 4x8 velocity sensitive pads, which is what you're going to be using to map in your drum parts and your synth parts, as well as things like sidechain and effects. And this is basically where most of the controls come from. You also have these buttons along the side, which are not velocity sensitive, they just click in, but they do have RGB backlighting, so you still get a good look at what's going on. We have our master volume knob, which will go to, pardon the helicopter, you've got the master volume knob, which is going to go to the speaker underneath if nothing is plugged into either of the two sets of outputs. You have your filter knob turned to the right, and it's a high pass filter. Turned to the left, and it's a low pass. It kind of clicks in the middle just a little bit. It's got a little more resistance than just twisting it. And then you've got your 8 macro knobs, count them 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 macro knobs, each with an individual LED underneath it, telling you roughly where you are left to right encoding. Now, past that, if we look at the back, you have your power button, your 12 volts of DC power in, you have your USB-B in, which you cannot power this from. That's how you'll take things like different patches and put them on, different sessions, so you can have the full control of this. You can also use it from the USB-B as a MIDI controller, so you can have these pads and the macro knobs go to whatever you want. You've got your MIDI out and in, each 3.5mm headphones jacks, which transfer to the 5-pin DIN MIDI when you have your breakout cables. We also have a left/mono and a right 1/4 inch output. Looking at the bottom, you have your one speaker and your slightly rubberized padding on the outside. On the side, you have your battery compartment door, and that's it. So when we talk about the synth engine, you have 2 settings for synth that you can use at the same time, and you've got 4 drum patterns. 1 and 2 are set to the same track, and 3 and 4 are also set to the same track. So for pattern-wise, that's what it's going to be set up as. You also have sidechain on each of the synths, which is locked to drum number 1. So if I just write out a quick, set drum 3, quick hi-hat, sounds. So then if I just go, so we've got that set, and then if I just lay in some bass, that kind of takes up roughly the same space sonically. So then if I take the sidechain, I'm going to bring it up to about a 4. So you get that ducking effect that's really common in a lot of music. Past that, we've got 6 voices of polyphony, and the macro controls go for each individual preset, each synth patch, so it'll be different depending on what you have loaded. So if I go patch this patch, that's kind of the harshness, and that's the LFO speed of how it's going for pitch wise. And let's go to the drum parts. So we have up to 64 samples, 4 through 8, this is the first one, and then if we hit the other octave button, then we have the second one. Synth, you also have that, just hit shift and hold so you can choose, and then hit here, and you'll get a lot more different sounds. So drums 1 and 2, let's take a look at that. Wrong button. So we have something called sample flip. So if I take these off, I go to here real quick, say I find what I want to use. If I record, doesn't sound the greatest, but you get the idea. So sample flip, you can play multiple samples through the same track, they just can't be playing at the same time, because with drums you only have one voice. Past that, we can have up to 60 seconds stored in here. 60 seconds of samples, so you can have a specific stab that you want, or a specific sample from a song, like some vocals or something, as long as it doesn't exceed that 60 seconds total for all of the 64 samples, then you're fine. The macro controls for the drums are all going to be the same. The first is going to be pitch. The second is decay. The third is distortion. And the fourth is kind of like a mini filter. I'm not entirely sure, but I haven't really had to use that much. But the drums really do the trick when you need when you know what you want out of the box. So next, if we go to the effects button, so if we go to the effects button, we have 16 different types of delay, 8 different types of reverb, and you can adjust the amount of send to each. There's a lot of different types, and you can get some really cool sounds out of it. Next, for the sequencer, if I go back to synth 1, you can already see what's going on here. So you've got 8 steps for the first, 16 steps for the second. This makes up a pattern. If I go to the pattern screen, we have one pattern. If I play the second one, there's nothing playing because there's nothing coded in. So you can chain them together by holding the first one that you want to use and pressing the second one. And you see the one that is not currently being used is brightly lit, and the one that is being used is flashing. And it'll go between whatever you have. It'll go in chronological order, obviously, because it's a sequencer. You have 8 patterns per track, so that means if you chain them all, you can have up to 128 steps at any given time. You can also record automation real time. And you get the idea. I believe you can have up to 2,400 actions in any given session, so you can have a lot of different automation running. So if you want your hi-hat to be longer on one step and shorter on another, so you can get that open and close effect, You can do that really easily. You also can control the velocity and the gate. So if you just click the velocity button and the gate button, so I can take this one down to about there. So when I play, it's not as harsh. If I go gate, I can pick how long it's held. And you see you can get a lot of cool stuff with it. If we go to drums, however, if I pick the gate, it won't just do how long the note is, but it will go for micro steps. So if I go, it's number 1, if I add in 2 there, you can make it do a rolling effect, or kind of a flam, if you will, and you can get a lot of really interesting combinations out of that if you want to have swing on some parts and not have swing on others. Other utility parts you've got a mixer. You have all 6 tracks that you can mute and unmute, and you also have individual volumes for each different track. So if I want to keep my sidechain, for example, alright, let's go heavy sidechain. If I want to keep my sidechain, but I don't want to hear that drum part, I can bring it down but not mute it, because if you mute it, the sidechaining effect stops. We also have tempo. So the tempo can go from 40 beats per minute all the way up to 240 beats per minute internally. If you put in an external, I believe it's going to be 20 to 300. So you have a really wide range of how fast your track is. You also have your swing. So it can go all the way from 20% all the way up to 80%. Generally, I leave it at 50 so that I can really customize how the swing goes. And then finally here we have the scales mode. So each of these buttons on the bottom corresponds to a specific type of scale, and the last one being chromatic. Up top you have a mini keyboard where you can set your root note of the scale. So let's say I want D sharp natural minor. Natural minor is going to be the first setting, and then you click there, and that's the first. Now all 15 scales, including the chromatic mode, are as follows. It goes natural minor, major, Dorian, Phrygian, Mixolydian, melodic minor, harmonic minor, bebop Dorian, blues, minor pentatonic, Hungarian minor, Ukrainian Dorian, Marva, Todi, whole tone, and chromatic. If I said any of those wrong, please correct me in the comments. And you can get some really spooky sounds out of that. And there's a lot that you can do with this. So you can, let's take the filter down. You can really make that club music vibe. So that's all. So what do I think about the circuit? I love it. As soon as I picked it up, I kind of knew what was going on. Within the next day, I had a handle on every single feature without really reading the manual in too deep. Now, don't get me wrong. I love the circuit, but there are some things that kind of annoy me. The fact that there's only one filter for the whole thing, high pass or low pass, no real band pass, that can get a little annoying sometimes, but for the tracks that I'm currently making, it's going well. The saving was a little finicky at first. I didn't really understand how it was until I read that part of the manual. The plastic case, it feels sturdy for the most part, but there's just some parts that I'm afraid it's going to break off over time. And I mean, maybe not right now, but if I eventually go gig with this, or if I just toss it in a bag, I feel like some of these knobs are just going to fall right off. And I've heard that happen to some people, but it's kind of rare. Another thing is that the scales mode, I didn't really know what I was doing. All I knew from my experience with something like the Launchpad X was that you pick what note you want to start on, and then you have your different types of scales. I didn't know what the scales were, and that's kind of weird to do unless you have a cheat sheet, which I'll put a link to one below. And the final thing is that the internal speaker isn't the greatest. It's all right, and it's decent for showing people something if you just don't want to have to plug in any of your audio equipment or like a wireless speaker. But it does the job. Now, do I recommend this? Yes. 10 out of 10, yes. Is it a viable option in 2020? Definitely. It's had a lot of firmware updates over the years, and there's a lot of things that have been fixed, changed, completely rewired, and I love it. From the moment that I saw it on one of Bo Beats' videos, I knew that this was something that I would love. And so many people use it. People like Ricky Tynes, Bo Beats, Gabe Miller Music makes a crap ton of stuff about it, as well as one of my newest favorite artists, Inky the Cat. Now, it might be 5 years old, and that might put you off a little bit, but I think it's a great idea to have. The fact that it's not plugged into anything, and I can immediately start playing no matter where I am, that's amazing. And the fact that it has scales mode and so many synth patches that you can drop in there is just, it blew me out of the water when I first picked it up. So overall, do I recommend? Yes. But there is a caveat. I bought mine used for about $270 off of Guitar Center, I think it was. I suggest going that way. I don't know if a new one would be totally worth it. I feel like at this point, 5 years later, used is going to be a lot cheaper and a lot easier to get your hands on. So you don't have to spend time digging through sites and sites and sites trying to find one that isn't $330, that might be $310. So, do I recommend? Yes. Definitely, 10 out of 10. But you probably want to try to find it used or on a really good deal. So, that's all. See you next time.